Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and in this video I'm going to be creating a follow-up material to the dungeon stone floor that we made in the last video. And what this is going to be is some bricks to make up the walls of this dungeon environment. And these bricks are really important because there's going to be a lot of different floors that I'll be making for the dungeon, but these bricks are roughly going to cover a lot of the total area of the dungeon. So they're going to be pretty versatile. I'm going to make a lot of parameters that I can change so that will create a lot of variation, stuff like that, so you won't really notice the repeating pattern, but these bricks are going to cover a lot of the area of the dungeon. So I have to make sure to do a good job on them. So they won't look as complex as the stone floor I made, but it's still going to require a lot of work and a lot of customization. So I'll call it stone or dungeon stone bricks just to create it, just to make it consistent with the last one. And I'll start by making the base material. And let me just reset my layout. Alright, that's a bit better. And I'll give it a quick save. And let's make this dielectric again. And we want to display on our 3D cube. I think this is the rounded cube. Yep. And let's enable height. Alright, so now I'm going to just use the brick generator. If you want something more customizable, you might just want to create a rectangle and use the tile generator. But the brick generator is enough of customization for me. But if I did want to create something a little bit more original, I might opt to just build one myself, because this brick generator is really just a combination of nodes already available to you in Substance Designer anyways. So you could just build a function like this yourself, but just with a little more customization. But I think that between the height, slope, and offset that they have, and also the gap, I think that that's enough for me to work with. The first thing I want to change is the bevel. I might want to do something a little less, like 0.3 instead of 0.5. Yeah, that looks a bit better for my purposes. And for slope, I want to give that some variation. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And bricks, I think 4x8 is going to be enough. I don't think I need more than that. Also, for offset variation, I might go 0.1 just to mix it up a little bit. And yeah, so these are our final bricks, at least the final shape of the brick. Okay. So also, I'm going to create a new shape. And okay, so here we have what looks like a brick, and I'm going to go into tile generator, and I'm going to do 4x8 again. So you can see how we can make the brick generator using the tile generator. And if we change the offset to something like 0.5, now we have the same exact thing. And I realized that I'm actually going to need this tile generator instead, because I'm going to need to create masks as well. So I should have known that from the beginning, but I apologize. So yeah, I'm going to need to use this tile generator so that when I bump up this luminance random, now we have some nice masks. So now I can say like I want a leak on this brick or I want cracks on this brick. So that's why I'm going to be using the tile generator. I just thought of that right now, so once again I apologize. Rotation random, I'm going to do 0.01. That's a little much for bricks, so 0.05. Yeah, and also if I change this to image input, alright, so that's not what we want. So I'm going to change this to square. And then lower the scale to 0.95 looks good. And now I'll bevel it. We're going to go negative with this. Okay. So now, instead of using a square pattern, I just did that to sort of preview what we were doing. But now we want to create these slopes ourselves. Like the slopes that the brick generator had, but that the tile generator doesn't have right now. So I'm going to create a square shape myself and go 0.99 and use a quick blend node and blend this with the gradient linear. So just like that. And now I'll drop this into the pattern input and choose image input. So now you can see we have all of these sloped pieces here, but they're all going in one direction. So now I'll change the rotation random again, and we have this. And this bevel is not really cooperating with what we're doing. And I don't think it's going to. So I just want to quickly see what happens if we bevel before the blend. So it still looks fine. Let me just lower this. Maybe negative 0.1. And that looks pretty okay. Yeah, that seems fine. And for the opacity of this, I might just go halfway. And maybe bump up the scale of these. 0.99. Alright, let's do 1. So now they're very close together. And that looks pretty good. And I know we could have just achieved this extremely quickly with the brick generator, but I think it's going to be useful to make it ourselves. So it will pay off later on. And now I'm going to grab some grunge and leaks. So grunge map 003. Turn down the balance a lot. And I'll blend it so the tile generator will go in the background and these leaks will go in front. And now I just want to subtract. And we get these nice divots running down. And I want to go with something very minimal, so like 0.1. So there you can see that detail happening. And also I want to just put chips on every brick. So what I always like to do there is just blend with some Gaussian noise and just subtract that from the top of every single brick. So something like 0.1, and also bump up the scale, maybe like 64. Okay, now just to preview a little bit better and see what we're doing, I'll turn on AO and normals. So I'll just create those two inputs quickly. And I always like to turn down the height depth of the AO to something like 0.01 because it's usually pretty strong. Okay, and I'm going to turn down the cracks on this just a little bit. It's like 0.05. And turn up the Gaussian noise to 128. So double what it currently is. And now we have some nice details. But it seems a little much, so 0.005 for that strength. Okay, so now I'm going to go into cells. I think cells 2 is what I want. And I'm going to invert it and use that to subtract from the bricks that we currently have. And turn the scale way down to like 4. Turn the edge width down to maybe like 0.1. Yeah, something like that. And now we want to mask out where these cracks will happen. So I'm going to take the same tile generator, but this time I just wanted to use simple squares instead. Turn up the luminance random, plug that in. And now I'll blend it again. Maybe with some cells 3, inverted, the same mask, and subtract again. Now maybe go like 0.25 and 0.25. Okay, and right now I'm just sort of testing stuff out. This isn't necessarily how it's going to look. You can see it doesn't look very organic at all right now. So what I'm going to do is, with the tile generator mask that we use to make these very, very large cracks, I'm going to put a levels on that because I only want these large cracks to happen once in a while. So I'll crank up this black value. And now you can see that it's extremely spread out. Yeah, so that looks pretty good right there. And now I'll go ahead and start with the slope blur grayscales. So a large Perlin noise to begin with the min blending mode. Maybe something like 0.25. Alright, so 0.1 seems to work. And now I'll do it again. This time with 64. And 0.05. Maybe even 0.025. Or I think 0.05 is fine. And one final time. And this time I will use 128. and maybe 0.02, or even half of that. Alright, so that looks pretty good. And now the last slope or grayscale, I usually like to use, spell that completely wrong, I usually like to use the fractal sum base. Gives a nice stone feel to it. And how about 0.1 there? Alright. So now when we look at this material here, the only complaint that I truly have is some of these cracks don't look as organic as they could. So let me reset this layout. Yeah, so some of these cracks don't look as organic as they could, so I'll take the cells 2 and do a quick directional warp with some very low scale purling noise. So let's do 8 and really crank up this directional warp. And that is starting to look really good right here. And now I actually might do another little directional warp with some clouds. So here's what it looked like before, and then when we warp it with some clouds, looks a little cooler. I could actually crank up the intensity a lot, like something like, I guess 10 is fine. And now these cracks are starting to look really good. Alright, I think I'm fine with that. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to turn this slope back up, because I think more slope looks more interesting. So I just changed where this shape in the bevel is multiplied with the gradient linear 1. I just turned the opacity up to 1 from 0.5, and now we get this look here. So some bricks are a lot more receded, but others are popping out a lot more, and you can see the height map just changes completely. There's a lot more dark areas. And now we're gonna have to mix it with some mortar in the background. So I'll do a height blend with the bricks on top, and now we're gonna have to create some mortar. So I'll use a fluid node and some clouds. And I'm just gonna blend these together with a multiply. Really crank up the fluid scale. So 8 seems to be pretty good. And you could also use this to create moss too. It's starting to look a little bit like moss. And I want it to be less on the fluid side, more on the cloud side. So to do that, I'm just going to switch the order of these, and now turn down the opacity to something like 0.25. So we still have hints of the fluid in there, but it's mostly the clouds. And now we want this to look a bit more like mortar that's been like scraped and stuff. So I'm going to grab some stripes and I'm going to turn down the shift, turn down the width, make it a bunch of stripes, grab a shape, which is going to be a paraboloid, and multiply them both together. So now we have stripes where the paraboloid would be. And it's nice and faded too. Okay. And now what I'll do is we want some variation in it. So I'm going to blend it with some clouds, but with clouds in the background. With clouds in the opacity and with the stripes in the foreground. So now we have this smudgy looking stripe shape. And finally, I will do a directional warp with some Perlin noise. So something like that. Just to give it a little bit of bump to it, like it's not completely perfect. Alright, and now I'm going to go with a tile sampler, and what I'm going to do is put this directional warp output here into the pattern input, and put the mortar into the background input. And we'll use this as our mortar. And now we want this to actually use the mortar scrapes as our pattern, so we'll just do pattern input. And we can't actually see it, so I'm going to try a different approach where I'm just going to blend them together without using the tile sampler, and the blend will just be a subtract. And yeah, now we can actually see it. So now the tile sampler, I want the amount to maybe be 64 by 64, and the scale to be maybe something like 5. Scale random all the way up, position random all the way up, rotation random all the way up. So now we have these scratches all over the place. And mask random, how about 0.5? Yeah, so now you can see we have mortar with all of these, I guess, like trowel scratches everywhere. And I can even, if there's a luminance random option, okay, color random, you can turn that all the way up as well. So that way, instead of it all being perfectly uniform all the way across, it looks a lot better when you have the variation. And I might even change the scale to double. That's probably too much. So yeah, 5 works. Yeah, 5 is probably fine. So I'll call this all mortar here, and change the boundaries on this frame. And I can just call this the bricks. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and blend these bricks with the mortar using a subtract. And I know we're going to need a levels node eventually to sort of customize this. So I'll do that as well, and I will call this Mortar Mask. And now let's start working on the height. Or excuse me, the color. So 2 uniform colors with a blend. Drop that into base color. And we'll put the mortar mask in there. So because of this mask, we know mortar is going to be on top, and we know the bricks will be the background. Alright, so you can already see the mortar mask isn't perfect yet. So we can just tweak that a bit with the levels. But I don't want it to be too extreme either. Probably want to change the height blend too. So for the offset, I usually do something like let's try 0.75. So I'm just tweaking this until we get the mortar to show up wherever it should be. But we don't want it on the bricks either. It's fine if a little bit gets on here and there, but we just don't want too much. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to restart that because it didn't go as good as I would have wanted. Definitely is tough. So I also just want to try taking this and inverting it. Putting the levels on that. I wonder if I'll get a little more success that way, but I doubt it. Okay, so that's not that bad. That actually worked pretty well. What I might do is combine both of them. So we sort of get the best of both worlds. So we get like the smudge organic look of this, but also the clarity of this one. So I'll just blend them both within add. So yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. All right, cool. And next up is I want to maybe make a couple leaks on some of these bricks. So I'll put a new blend in the height. Grab a new grunge. That looks like leaks. So let's try grunge 002 this time. Turn down the balance. Alright. And I'm going to transform it to condense it. Then go with no tiling. Alright, so now we have some leaks here. And I'll do a histogram select. Because I only want to select one of them. Or just several of them. Okay, and now I'm going to scale it back up to what it was. And I want to just blend it and multiply with the paraboloid. So now we pretty much have one leak here. And I'll just scale it out again. All right. So now I'm just cropping off the top. And transforming it up. And I don't want any tiling, but I want to scale this leak. Alright, so here's our finalized leak here. And I'm going to drop it in here. So now we can preview this leak, and yeah, it looks pretty good. Could even stretch it down a bit more. And going to grab the same tile generator that we used to make the bricks themselves, and I'm going to drag the leak in. Image input, no rotation random because they should all be pointing down. And okay, yeah, no rotation random. And throw it in here, and now every brick has its own leak. So now I'll do scale random. Or maybe I don't want to mess with that actually. But I can do some offset random. Probably don't want to mess with position random. But luminance random is okay. And random mask. Alright, so now I want to do a max lighten. So it shows up over the brick. And change it to something like 0.2. And I'm going to highlight all of this. Frame it. And call it mini leaks. And also I want to try this leaks here as well, because I'm interested in how well it works. I've never used it before, because I might be able to take advantage of this as well. For some reason it's pretty sharp. Yeah, I don't think I'll use that. Alright. So that's it for that. Here's our colors. So next, or actually before these leaks, I'm going to grab another leak grunge, and do a height blend with it. And I'll put these on top and the bricks below. And the height offset won't be much, but maybe 0.1 doesn't really show up. So maybe let's try 0.2, seems pretty good. So I'm going to call these large leaks. And we're going to need a new subtract blend. With some levels. Frame it. And this will be the large leaks masks. So I'll just color in the large leaks for now with something simple. And I'll just tweak the mask accordingly for now. And blend it again, this time with the mini leak. Alright, cool. And I'll throw a levels on the mini leak as well, on the mini leak mask, because sometimes it's showing up when there's no leak actually there, and I want to prevent that from happening. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now I'll drag all of this outwards. So large leaks mask, all of that, and the mini leaks. And now I want to create a little bit of moss. So some fluid. Let me see what other noises we have. Maybe some spots. And maybe some cells 1 to give us some clumps. And I'm really just experimenting here. Alright, I think that could pass for some very simple moss. So it's just a blend of some black and white spots 1, some high density fluid, and some cells. So I'll call this moss. And do a height blend with moss on top. Or actually with the bricks on top. Yeah, that looks better. And it's okay to have the moss sort of over other stuff, so I'll leave the height offset at 0.5. In this fluid, I'm really going to change the warp intensity and the disorder. And as far as the pattern size, you can see we can make them very narrow. But I think for moss, it helps to actually make them a bit more stub-like. So yeah, that looks much better. When we change the pattern size, it's something like 0.25 on the X and Y on the 1. Then it starts looking a little more like vegetation. Alright, so now I'll blend these two together. So bricks on top and the fluid on the bottom. And a subtract. And a levels. Frame it and call this Moss Mask. And now I don't want any leaks to appear on the moss mask. And I realize I actually don't even like these mini leaks that I made. So I'm just going to get rid of those entirely. Yeah, kind of a waste of time, I know, but it's fine. I think the other leaks are enough, is basically what I decided. And also it just makes things a little bit easier. So now I'm going to take this large leaks mask, and in the blend, or actually I'll just spread this out and create a new blend. And I don't want these leaks to affect anywhere where there's moss, because it doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to take the moss mask and put that in the opacity of the leaks. And actually the leaks should be in the background. So now anywhere there's moss, there should not be leaks. And I'll just put in a new blend here so that we can color the moss. Something a little green. Put in the moss mask. And let's crank up the levels. Alright, so that looks pretty nice so far. And now it's really time to start solidifying these colors, because right now, obviously it doesn't look too good, because I'm just throwing in 4 colors and not much else. So this is our height map right now, or our color map. You can see it looks pretty basic. So it's time to make this all look a bit nicer. So for our stone, I grab some clouds, and I'm going to use this as the opacity map to blend together 2 different color stone. So one can be a bit lighter, and then I'll blend this with some dirt. And the dirt will be a bit darker. So now the stone has a little bit of wear to it. And then we're going to need some edge damages. And some edge wear. So I'll start with some edge wear. So that's just going to need some curvature. And basically wherever there's edge wear, I'm going to tint the stone a little bit white. So see how that turns out. It's pretty powerful right now. So I'll lower the level. Actually, we can lower the intensity of the curvature too. So yeah, that's pretty strong, but I can just change it to something like 0.25. Even that's a lot. So I'll turn down edges width. And let's try 0.1. Alright, and now we will do some edge damage. So a new curvature map. Sorry, a new curvature map and some AO. Here's our edge damages now. And I'll blend this with some more white uniform color. Turn this curvature up. And to me, the edge damage node is really what sells the look of rock. So it's important to get this one right. But this is what really helps it all come together. So 0.25 looks pretty good. Also, I think the stone is just a little too dark. So I'm going to lighten up this lighter color value. Okay, that looks really good. Alright, so onto the mortar. I'm going to blend two different grays together. And I'll just use this mortar height map here to be the determining factor, and levels just so I have a little bit of leeway to fine tune the colors. And I'm just going to switch the order of them and turn the blend mode down to 0.5. So here's our base color so far. I think I'm going to tint the mortar too a little. Using some clouds. Alright, I'll go back up to that, and I want to tint it a little whitish yellow, just so we can start to visualize the difference between the mortar and the bricks a little bit better. But I don't want to be too strong, so maybe like 0.25. Alright, so that should do for now. So here's our new texture. And now for the vegetation, I'm going to do a gradient map and find wherever I created the moss. Okay, so right here, plug this into the gradient map and the gradient map where the moss was. So now just use this gradient editor and start coloring everything in. Alright, I think that sells the look of moss for now, which means that the last thing I have to color in is the leaks. So I'm just going to do another quick blend. Doesn't really matter because it's going to be so subtle. So I'll just use this clouds node I have lying around and just color it. So I'm going to pick some darker colors. Something like that will do. And also, I want to see again where I add the leaks in. Okay, so I add it right here. So you can see we can make the leaks extremely powerful. But I don't really want to overdo it. So I think 0.25 should do. But I do want to edit this leaks mask a bit. Just make these colors a bit stronger. Okay. Change this to 0.25. And I think lighter colors actually look better. Sort of like something like gravel falling down. Alright, yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to edit a lot of these colors now that we have the colors actually figured out. So what I want to do is actually tint this darker. I want to tint the mortar darker, maybe something like 0.5. And then I want to make this moss look pretty dead. So I'm going to pick all dead colors. Okay, so something like that. Yeah, that's actually really the look I want because this is a dungeon and things aren't really fresh and alive. I want more of like a decayed look. So that suits my purposes pretty well. Also, I'm realizing I can't really see too many cracks, too many small cracks on these bricks. So I'm going to go to wherever I put in all of those cracks. Okay, so right here, I'll turn that up. Alright, so now I can see them. So let's go with 0.5. Yeah, that looks really good. And the next thing I need to do is enable roughness. So I'll go with the uniform color and set it to grayscale this time. And I want to blend two of these together. And now it's just a matter of taking these masks I've already made and determining the roughnesses that I want to describe each material in each mask. So right now it's just super shiny. So like if I want to make this wet, it's pretty easy. But I don't want to do that. I want to grab the Mortar Mask. Alright, I was looking for it for a while. So yeah, even when you label stuff, things can still be hard to find when you have a pretty cluttered graph going on. But yeah, so now I take the Mortar Mask. So now this top uniform color is what is describing the Mortar Mask. So I'm just going to set that to something a little rough. And the bottom describes the stone, so something a little more shiny. And now I'm going to do a new blend for each of these. And a clouds note for the variation. I really like using clouds 3 just to make some pretty simple smudges and things like that. It's pretty useful. Alright, so now we have some roughness variation going on. And I want to do another blend for the brick roughness. And I'm going to grab these edge damages. And looking at this brick, I want the edge damages to be I guess to be a little bit more it's hard to say which one I like better, shiny or rough. But I guess shiny makes a little more sense, like the water is sunken inside of it. I'm not really too sure, but whatever it is, it should be fine. So now I need to color in the moss. So I'll take the moss mask, and I'm going to give the moss its own blend using the moss height. And 2 colors. And I think the moss should be a little rough, a little wet. Okay, so something like that should look pretty good. And lastly, let's do these leaks. So I'll take a large leak mask. And it should be pretty shiny. So a new uniform grayscale color. And let's just put a little bit of shine to it. And put the blending mode to 0.5 so we don't destroy the stuff that's below it. So I still want some of that roughness information to shine through. Okay, so this is looking pretty good so far. Now I'm just going to add a couple details. So I'm going to take the dirt node, some AO, a new curvature map, and I'm going to use this to blend some dirt color into the texture that we already have. So it's pretty strong right now. So I'll just tint it dirt and slide down the opacity something like 0.25. So now we have a really nice looking color map. And also I realized the mortar doesn't really have much variation at all. So to do that, I'm going to make this very white, and I'm going to make this very dark. And then I'm also going to grab some very, very small noise. So maybe a fractal base. And I'm going to blend in some white into this. So maybe 0.1. Alright, that looks good. Now that we have the dirt, I'm going to sharpen this up. Okay, and now just to make a little more impact on this roughness map, I'm going to grab the dirt mask, and wherever there's dirt, I'll change the color to white. And let's go with 0.25 on that. And now because I'm adding in all this roughness, I'm going to have to make the stones themselves just a bit more shiny. And finally, I'm going to grab some fluid. Turn up the scale and really narrow this all down, sort of like raindrops. And I don't want it to cover everything, so I'm going to blend it with some clouds. And I want all of these raindrops to be extremely wet. So I'm just going to turn it all the way down. And now we have some nice raindrop streaks going down all of our bricks. And I can even color these too. So yeah, I chose like this green color here. So now what I'll do is create some output nodes, and we'll just take a look at these outputs that we have. And now I'm going to sort of maximize this view, and I can take a look at this nice brick texture that we made. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. It's definitely going to fit the dungeon environment well. I think the color and roughness maps really help make this pop a lot. I think the streaks are a little bit rough, but I guess I could just pretend that that was the look that I was going for. And definitely all of these mortar scrapes look very nice too. And the mortar mask really fits well, and it's pretty tight to these bricks. So I think all in all, it looks really good. So I'll just lower that window and export these outputs. And yeah, there we go, guys. That was the dungeon brick material in Substance Designer. be working more in this dungeon in the future, so you can expect videos going up on the channel pretty soon. And thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you want more, and I will see you all next time.